Black girl went missing in 1989. The case went cold until her bracelet was found in charity auction. The paintbrush trembled in Isaiah Lewis's hand as he stared at the small glass display case. Around him, Atlanta's most prestigious charity auction buzzed with the chatter of well-dressed donors and the soft clink of champagne glasses, but all he could hear was the thundering of his own heartbeat. There, nestled between a vintage brooch and an antique compass, lay a child's bracelet. Tiny alphabet beads spelled out a name that made his world tilt on its axis: Amira. Isaiah's breath caught in his throat. The bracelet was exactly as he remembered, each bead carefully threaded, the small heart charm dangling from the clasp, the slightly faded pink string that their mother had chosen because pink was Amira's favorite color, just like yours is blue, baby. But that was impossible. Amira had been deceased for 33 years. "Excuse me," Isaiah managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper as he flagged down a passing auction volunteer. "This bracelet, where did it come from?" The elderly woman adjusted her glasses and peered at the display card. "Oh, that sweet little thing? It's listed as found object, unknown origin, donated anonymously. Someone dropped it off last month with a box of other estate items. Rather touching, isn't it? The way children's jewelry always tells a story." A story? Isaiah's mind raced back 33 years to a cramped apartment in rural Alabama, where two 6-year-old twins sat cross-legged on a worn carpet while their mother, weak from the cancer that would take her just months later, carefully strung beads onto thin cord. "One for each of my babies," she had whispered, her hands shaking but determined. "So you never forget who you are, no matter what happens to me." Isaiah had treasured his matching bracelet, blue beads spelling Isaiah, until the day Great Aunt Martha took it away, claiming it was too girly for a growing boy. But Amira's had been buried with her after the car crash. At least, that's what Aunt Martha had told him. Standing in the auction hall, surrounded by Atlanta's elite discussing art and philanthropy, Isaiah felt like a fraud. For the past 15 years, he'd built his reputation painting haunting portraits of missing persons, faces pulled from old photographs and police reports, brought back to life through oil and canvas. His collectors praised his ability to capture the humanity in the forgotten, the overlooked, the erased. But he'd never painted his twin sister. How could he? She was supposed to be at peace. Isaiah pulled out his phone with shaking hands and photographed the bracelet from every angle. The auction was in full swing now, and he watched in agony as bidder after bidder raised their paddles for other items. When the bracelet finally came up, lot number 47, he bid aggressively, his heart pounding as the price climbed higher than such a simple piece should warrant. "Sold to paddle number 23 for $350. As Isaiah approached the payment table, his legs felt unsteady. The bracelet was placed in a small velvet pouch and handed to him with a cheerful smile. "What a lovely memento! Do you collect children's jewelry?" "Something like that," he murmured, clutching the pouch like a lifeline. Back in his downtown Atlanta studio apartment, Isaiah sat at his kitchen table under the harsh fluorescent light, the bracelet spread out before him. With meticulous care, he opened his old childhood sketchbook, one of the few possessions he'd managed to keep through years of moving between relatives after Aunt Martha's death. There, on page 12, drawn in faded colored pencil by his 6-year-old hand, was a picture of two children holding hands. The girl wore a pink dress and had a bracelet on her wrist. Below the drawing, in careful block letters, he'd written, "Me and Amira forever." The bracelet in his sketch was identical to the one now lying on his table. Isaiah's hands shook as he compared every detail. The spacing of the beads. The particular shade of pink string. Even the small fraying where the heart charm had worn against the cord. It was perfect. Too perfect. His phone buzzed with a text from his gallery manager. "Great turnout tonight. That new portrait series is getting incredible buzz. When can we schedule your next show?" Isaiah stared at the message, then at the bracelet, then at his childhood drawing. For years, people had asked him why he chose to paint missing persons. He'd always given the same answer. Everyone deserves to be remembered. Everyone deserves to be found. But the truth was more complicated. Every face he painted, every missing child or vanished adult he brought back to life on canvas, was a prayer. A desperate, silent plea to the universe. If they can be found, maybe she's still out there too. Now, holding Amira's bracelet, Isaiah felt something crack open inside his chest. Not hope. Hope was too dangerous, too naive for a man who'd spent 33 years mourning his twin. This was something sharper, more desperate. This was the terrible, beautiful possibility that everything he'd been told was a lie. Isaiah stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair. He needed answers, and he knew exactly where to start. The auction volunteer had mentioned the bracelet came from an estate donation, routed through a small-town antique shop. He grabbed his laptop and began searching, cross-referencing antique dealers within 100 miles of where he and Amira had last been together. 3 hours later, he found it. Rosewood Antiques and Estates Sales, in Millfield, Alabama, just 47 miles from where their parents' custody battle had played out in 1989. As dawn broke over Atlanta, Isaiah packed a small bag and loaded his car. He left the bracelet on his kitchen table, afraid to take it with him, afraid to leave it behind. Before walking out the door, he called his gallery manager. "Cancel my appointments for the next few days," he said. "I need to go home." "Home? I thought you said you didn't have family left." Isaiah paused, looking back at the bracelet one last time. "I thought so too." The drive to Alabama felt like traveling backward through time. With each mile marker, Isaiah's carefully constructed adult life, his art, his reputation, his identity as the lone survivor, began to feel increasingly fragile. By the time he reached the outskirts of Millfield, his hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. But he didn't turn around. For the first time in 33 years, Isaiah Lewis was going to demand the truth about his sister. And he had the strangest, most terrifying feeling that the truth was going to demand everything from him in return. The bracelet had found its way back to him for a reason. Now he had to find out why. Rosewood Antiques and Estates Sales sat on the corner of Main Street like a forgotten memory, its paint peeling and windows clouded with dust. Isaiah pushed through the door, causing a brass bell to announce his arrival with a tired chime. An elderly man with silver hair looked up from behind a cluttered counter, his eyes immediately wary. Small towns had long memories, and Isaiah knew his face didn't belong here. "Help you with something?" the man asked, his Alabama drawl thick as molasses. Isaiah pulled out his phone, showing the photo of the bracelet. "I bought this at an auction in Atlanta. The paperwork said it came from your shop, part of an estate donation?" The man's expression shifted, becoming guarded. "We get a lot of estate items. Can't remember every piece. This one's special." Isaiah pressed, keeping his voice steady despite the storm building in his chest. "It belonged to my sister. She died when we were kids, or at least, that's what I was told." Something flickered across the man's weathered face. Recognition? Fear? He disappeared into the back room, leaving Isaiah alone among the dusty relics of other people's lives. When he returned, he carried a ledger book and a manila envelope. "Estate of Eleanor Fitzpatrick," he said finally. "Died 3 months ago. No family claimed her things. The bracelet was in a shoebox with some other children's items." He paused, studying Isaiah's face. "You really think it belonged to your sister?" "I know it did." Isaiah's voice was barely a whisper. "Do you have an address for the Fitzpatrick estate?" The man hesitated, then scribbled something on a piece of paper. 1247 Oakwood Drive. "But son..." He looked up, his eyes surprisingly kind. "Sometimes the past is better left buried." Isaiah drove through Millfield's winding streets, his GPS guiding him toward answers he wasn't sure he wanted to find. The Fitzpatrick house was a modest 2-story with a "for sale" sign tilting in the overgrown yard. But it was the neighbor's house that made his blood run cold. He knew that green-shuttered cottage. He'd lived there for 2 years after his parents' divorce, before Amira supposedly died and he was sent to live with Aunt Martha permanently. Isaiah parked and walked to the cottage's front door, his childhood flooding back with each step. Mrs. Henderson had lived here then, a kind woman who used to give him and Amira cookies when they played in her yard. The nameplate now read, Henderson Williams. An African-American woman in her 70s answered his knock, her face creasing into a confused smile. "Can I help you, young man? Mrs. Henderson? I'm Isaiah Lewis. I used to live next door with my sister Amira in 1989. You used to give us chocolate chip cookies." Her face went white. The pleasant mask cracked, revealing something that looked like terror. "Isaiah," she whispered, gripping the doorframe. "Oh, sweet Jesus. What are you doing here?" "Looking for the truth about my sister. I was told she died in a car crash, but I think that's a lie." He pulled out his phone again, showing her the bracelet photo. This was hers. "I found it at an auction, traced it back to the house next door." "Mrs. Henderson, what really happened to Amira?" The elderly woman's eyes darted nervously up and down the street. "You need to leave. Right now. I'm not leaving without answers." "You don't understand," she hissed, stepping closer. "Some secrets are dangerous. Your sister, she didn't die, but she might as well have. They made sure of that." Isaiah's heart hammered against his ribs. Who? Who made sure?" Before Mrs. Henderson could answer, her phone rang inside the house. She glanced at it, then back at Isaiah, her expression growing more panicked. "That's probably Martha," she said. "She always said this day would come. Said you'd figure it out eventually because you were too smart for your own good. Aunt Martha knows you're here?" Mrs. Henderson nodded grimly. "She's been keeping tabs on you for years. Your art shows, your gallery openings, she knows everything." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "Listen to me, child. There were people who wanted to split you and your sister. After your mama died, there was a fight over custody. Not just between your daddy's people and your mama's people, but others too. Foster families. Social workers. Money changed hands." Isaiah felt the world tilting. "What do you mean, money changed hands?" "Your sister was placed with a family in Georgia. Unofficially. No paperwork, no legal adoption. She just disappeared into the system. And Martha, she was paid to keep quiet about it. To tell you she was deceased so you'd stop asking questions." The front door across the street opened, and Isaiah turned to see a familiar figure stepping onto the Fitzpatrick house's porch. Even after all these years, even bent with age, he recognized her immediately. Great Aunt Martha stood there, her cane planted firmly on the cracked concrete, her eyes locked on his with an expression he'd never seen before. Not the stern but loving woman who'd raised him, but someone harder. Someone who'd been keeping secrets for 33 years. "Hello, Isaiah," she called across the street, her voice carrying the weight of decades. "I wondered when you'd finally come home." Mrs. Henderson grabbed Isaiah's arm. "Don't trust her," she whispered urgently. "She's not the woman who raised you. She's the woman who buried your sister alive." Isaiah looked between the two elderly women, one terrified, one resigned, and felt his carefully constructed life crumble around him. Everything he believed, everything he mourned, everything he built his identity on was built on lies. And standing across the street was the woman who'd orchestrated it all. "We need to talk," Martha called out, beginning her slow walk across the street. "It's time you learn the truth about what really happened to Amira." Isaiah's hands clenched into fists. After 33 years of grief, he was finally going to get answers. But looking at Martha's face, he had the terrible feeling that the truth was going to be worse than the lie. Martha's cane tapped against the pavement with each deliberate step, the sound echoing like a countdown to Judgment Day. Isaiah stood frozen between Mrs. Henderson's porch and the street, watching the woman who'd raised him approach with the measured pace of someone who'd been rehearsing this moment for decades. "You always were too curious for your own good," Martha said when she finally reached him. Up close, Isaiah could see the weight of years and secrets carved into her weathered face. "Just like your mama. Always digging where you shouldn't. Where is she?" The words exploded from Isaiah's chest. "Where is Amira?" Martha's eyes shifted to Mrs. Henderson, who shrank back into her doorway. Dorothy, go inside. This doesn't concern you anymore. It concerns all of us. Mrs. Henderson shot back, though her voice trembled. What we did to those children. What we did was survive. Martha cut her off sharply. Now go inside before you make this worse. Isaiah watched Mrs. Henderson retreat, her door clicking shut with finality. Then he turned back to Martha, this stranger wearing his gray-tense face. Start talking. Now. Martha studied him for a long moment, then nodded toward the empty Fitzpatrick house. Let's go inside. Some conversations require privacy. The house still smelled of old woman and loneliness. Martha moved through it like she'd been there before, settling into a chair by the window with the practiced ease of familiarity. Isaiah remained standing, every muscle coiled with 33 years of suppressed questions. Eleanor Fitzpatrick was a social worker. Martha began, her voice matter-of-fact. Retired, but she still had connections. Still had access to files that were supposed to be sealed. What files? Yours and Amira's custody case. After your mama died and your daddy ran off to Lord knows where, there was a mess. The court couldn't decide who should take you kids. Your mama's people wanted you both, but... Martha's voice trailed off. But what? But there were other interested parties. Families looking to adopt. Wealthy families who could pay for expedited processes. Martha's eyes hardened. The Carmichaels from Savannah. They wanted a daughter. Just a daughter. They offered good money for the right child. Isaiah felt the blood drain from his face. You sold her. I saved you both from worse. Martha snapped. You think I wanted to split you up? You think any of this was easy? Then why did you do it? Martha was quiet for so long that Isaiah thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Because they threatened to take you too. Both of you, to different families in different states. The Carmichaels, they promised Amira would have everything, good schools, college, a real future. And if I took you and kept quiet about her placement, they'd make sure you were safe with me. So you let them erase her. I let them give her a chance. Martha's cane struck the floor. What could I offer her? An old woman's social security check? A falling down house in Alabama? I was 67 years old, Isaiah. I could barely take care of one child, let alone two. Isaiah sank into a chair, the weight of the revelation crushing him. The car crash. The funeral. I remember crying at her grave. Eleanor arranged it all. Fake death certificate, closed casket service, everything official looking. The Carmichaels wanted a clean slate, no family looking for their new daughter. And you... Martha's voice cracked. You were so young. We thought you'd forget eventually. I never forgot. I've been painting missing people for 15 years because I never forgot her. Martha flinched as if he'd struck her. I know. I've seen your work. Every gallery showing, every newspaper article. You think I didn't know what you were really doing? Every face you painted was her face. Every missing person you brought back to life was your way of keeping her alive. Isaiah felt tears burning his eyes. Where is she now? What happened to the Carmichaels? I don't know. The admission seemed to cost Martha everything. Eleanor kept tabs for a few years, but then the Carmichaels moved. California, maybe? Or Oregon. Eleanor said they changed Amira's name, gave her a complete new identity. By the time she was 10, there was no trace of the little girl who used to live next door. But the bracelet. Eleanor never forgot either. When she cleaned out the Carmichael house after they moved, she found some of Amira's old things in the attic. She kept them, said maybe someday we need to remember. Isaiah stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the street looked exactly as it had 33 years ago, frozen in time while his sister had been living an entirely different life somewhere else. I have to find her. Isaiah, she doesn't know you exist. She doesn't remember Alabama or her real name or... She remembers something. She has to. Isaiah turned back to Martha, his jaw set with determination. I'm going to find her, and when I do, I'm going to tell her exactly who stole her life. Martha's face crumpled. I thought I was protecting you both. You protected yourself, Isaiah said quietly. And you robbed us of 33 years. He walked toward the door, then paused without turning around. I'm going to find her, Aunt Martha. And when I do, we're going to decide together whether we can ever forgive you. The door closed behind him with the soft finality of a lifetime's worth of lies finally crumbling to dust. Back in his Atlanta studio, Isaiah stood before a blank canvas at 3 a.m, his hands trembling with exhaustion and purpose. The bracelet lay on his easel's ledge, catching the harsh light of his work lamps like a talisman of memory. For the first time in 15 years of painting missing persons, he was going to paint someone he'd actually known. Someone he'd loved. Someone he'd lost not to tragedy, but to greed and fear disguised as protection. The first brushstroke felt like coming home. Isaiah painted with desperate intensity, pulling memories from the deepest corners of his mind. Amira's gap-toothed smile. The way she'd scrunch her nose when she concentrated on coloring. Her habit of humming made-up songs while she played with her dolls. Every detail he'd buried under 33 years of manufactured grief came pouring out onto the canvas. He painted her as he remembered her at 6, bright eyes full of mischief, the pink bracelet on her small wrist, her hair in the careful braids their mother had taught him to do when she got too sick to manage it herself. But he also painted her as she might be now, a woman of 39 with those same eyes, that same smile, carrying the invisible weight of a stolen identity. Days blurred together. Isaiah painted through sunrise and sunset, surviving on coffee and the burning need to remember her into existence. His gallery manager called repeatedly, but he ignored every ring. The outside world had ceased to matter. There was only Amira, emerging from oils and memory onto canvas after canvas. When he finally stepped back from the easel, exhausted and paint-stained, he'd created not just one portrait but an entire series. 7 paintings, each showing a different aspect of his lost sister. The centerpiece, a haunting image of 2 children reaching for each other across an impossible divide, seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. The girl who was erased, he whispered, naming the series aloud for the first time. His gallery manager, David, arrived that evening with Chinese takeout and barely contained frustration. Isaiah, you've been radio silent for a week. The collectors are asking questions, and we have the Morrison Commission due. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw the paintings. Jesus Christ. Who is she? My sister. David moved from painting to painting, his expression shifting from professional assessment to something deeper. I thought you said your sister died when you were kids. So did I. Isaiah's voice was hollow with exhaustion. Turns out I was wrong about a lot of things. These are incredible. Raw in a way your other work isn't. David paused in front of the centerpiece. There's something about her face. It's familiar somehow, but I can't place it. They hung the series in Isaiah's gallery the following week. The opening was unlike anything Isaiah had experienced in his career. People didn't just look at the paintings. They were drawn into them, standing for long minutes in front of each piece as if searching for something they'd lost themselves. The local art critic called it a masterpiece of memory and longing. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran a feature titled, Local Artists Search for Lost Sister. But it was social media that changed everything. A photography student at Georgia State posted a picture of the centerpiece on Instagram with the caption, "This painting made me cry and I don't know why. Who is she?" The post was shared hundreds of times within hours, then thousands. People began adding their own stories of lost siblings, separated families, children who'd vanished into flawed systems. But it was the comment that appeared on day 3 that stopped Isaiah's heart. OMG, this looks exactly like my friend Lena from my support group. Same eyes, same smile. She's always said she felt like she was missing pieces of her past. Isaiah stared at the comment until the words blurred together. The user was at Gracie ATL, and her profile showed a young black woman who ran trauma recovery groups in Metro Atlanta. He clicked on her message history, his hands shaking. Within an hour, he was sitting in a coffee shop in Decatur, across from Gracie Williams, a social worker who specialized in helping adults reconnect with fragmented childhood memories. "Lena Matthews," Gracie said, sliding a photograph across the table. "She's been coming to my group for 2 years, trying to piece together her early childhood. She remembers fragments: a boy she played with, someone braiding her hair, being moved around a lot after some kind of trauma she can't name." Isaiah looked down at the photograph and felt the world stop spinning. The woman in the picture was unmistakably Amira. Older, carrying the weight of hard years in the lines around her eyes, but with the same face he'd been painting from memory. The same nose, the same stubborn set to her jaw, the same soulful eyes that had haunted his dreams for 33 years. "Where is she?" he whispered. "She works at a counseling center in Marietta." "But Isaiah..." Gracie's expression grew serious. "You need to be careful how you approach this. Lena's spent her whole life feeling displaced, abandoned. Learning that she had a brother who was told she was deceased, that could either heal her or shatter her completely." Isaiah clutched the photograph like a lifeline. "She's alive. She's really alive. And she's been looking for pieces of herself her whole life," Gracie said gently. "Just like you've been looking for her." That night, Isaiah stood in his gallery surrounded by his paintings of Amira, holding her current photograph in one hand and their childhood bracelet in the other. Tomorrow, he would call the counseling center in Marietta. Tomorrow, he would try to give his sister back the life that had been stolen from both of them. But tonight, for the first time in 33 years, Isaiah Lewis allowed himself to believe in happy endings. The Marietta Community Counseling Center sat in a converted Victorian house, its wraparound porch painted a welcoming yellow that reminded Isaiah of childhood sunshine. He'd been sitting in his car across the street for 20 minutes, watching people come and go, wondering if one of them might be her. When she finally appeared, walking up the front steps with a canvas bag slung over her shoulder, Isaiah's breath caught in his throat. Even from a distance, even after 33 years, he knew her instantly. The way she moved, the tilt of her head, the careful way she held herself, it was Amira, but it was also a stranger shaped by experiences he'd never shared. Isaiah waited until she'd been inside for an hour before crossing the street. The receptionist, a kind-faced woman with silver hair, looked up when he entered. "I'm here to see Lena Matthews," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. It's about family." 20 minutes later, Isaiah sat in a small office decorated with motivational posters and thriving plants, listening to footsteps approach in the hallway. When the door opened, time seemed to fold in on itself. Lena, Amira, stood in the doorway, her dark eyes scanning his face with the careful assessment of someone trained to read people's pain. She was beautiful in a way that spoke of resilience rather than ease, her natural hair pulled back in a simple bun, laugh lines at the corners of her eyes despite the wariness in her expression. "I understand you wanted to speak with me about family," she said, settling into the chair across from him. Her voice was warm but guarded, professional but kind. "Are you looking for counseling services or—" Isaiah pulled out his phone, his hands trembling slightly as he scrolled to the photograph of his painting, the centerpiece from "The Girl Who Was Erased." He turned the screen toward her without speaking. Lena's intake of breath was sharp and sudden. Her hand flew to her throat, and for a moment, she looked exactly like the 6-year-old girl he remembered. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "I painted it. From memory." Isaiah's voice cracked. "Lena, I think your real name is Amira. I think you're my twin sister." The silence stretched between them like a chasm 33 years wide. Lena stared at the painting, then at Isaiah's face, her professional composure cracking piece by piece. "I dream about a boy," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "A boy who looks like me. He's always reaching for me, calling my name, but I can never hear what he's saying." She looked up, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I've dreamed about you my whole life." Isaiah felt his own tears fall as he pulled out the bracelet. "Do you remember this?" Lena's sob was wrenching. She reached for the bracelet with shaking hands, holding it as if it might disappear. "I remember pink beads. I remember someone, A woman with gentle hands stringing them together. She said it was so I'd never forget who I was. Our mother, Isaiah whispered. She made matching bracelets for us before she died. I had a blue one that said Isaiah. Isaiah. Lena repeated his name like a prayer, like a missing piece clicking into place. My brother Isaiah. They told me, the Carmichaels told me my birth family didn't want me. That I was lucky they chose me. I was told you died in a car crash. I grieved for you for 33 years. They sat in stunned silence, the weight of stolen decades hanging between them. Finally, Lena spoke again. I need to know everything. The truth. All of it. Isaiah told her about Martha, about the money, about the elaborate deception that had separated them. With each revelation, Lena's face cycled through grief, anger, and a deep, bone-weary sadness. I spent my whole life feeling like I was missing pieces, she said when he finished. In therapy, they call it attachment disorder, when children are separated from their primary bonds too early. I could never maintain long-term relationships because I was always waiting for people to disappear. I became obsessed with finding missing people, Isaiah replied. I told myself it was about justice, but really, I was always looking for you. 3 days later, they drove to Alabama together. Isaiah had called Martha to tell her they were coming, and the silence on the other end of the line had spoken volumes. They found her in the same green-shuttered cottage where Isaiah had spent his childhood, smaller and more frail than he remembered but still radiating the stubborn strength that had shaped his early years. Amira, Martha whispered when she saw Lena, her cane clattering to the floor. Oh, my sweet child. You look just like your mother. My name is Lena, Amira said quietly. You made sure of that. Martha's face crumpled. I thought I was saving you both. The system was going to split you up anyway, send you to different states, different lives. At least this way, Isaiah could stay with family. You weren't family to her, Isaiah said, his voice hard. You erased her. I gave her a chance at a better life. You gave her trauma, Lena replied, her counselor's training evident in her calm tone. You gave her decades of feeling incomplete, unwanted, abandoned. You gave her attachment issues and identity confusion and a lifetime of searching for something she couldn't name. Martha wept then, the kind of deep, body-shaking sobs that come from 33 years of suppressed guilt. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought I was protecting you. Isaiah looked at his sister, really looked at her, and saw not just the girl he'd lost, but the strong woman she'd become despite everything that had been taken from her. We're not here for your apologies, he said finally. We're here to say goodbye to the people we were when we believed your lies. Tomorrow, we start over as the people we actually are. Outside, standing in the yard where they'd once played as children, Amira took Isaiah's hand. We can't get back those 33 years, she said. No, he agreed. But we can make sure the next 33 count. For the first time since they'd found each other, they both smiled. 6 months later, Isaiah stood before a room packed with social workers, family court judges, and journalists, his sister beside him at the podium. Behind them, a banner read, Twin Flame Foundation, reuniting separated siblings. The bracelet that had started their journey was now displayed in a glass case at the front of the room, not as evidence of loss, but as proof that love could survive even the most deliberate attempts to destroy it. My name is Isaiah Lewis, he began, his voice carrying the quiet strength of someone who'd learned to transform pain into purpose. And this is my sister, Amira Matthews Lewis. We're here because the system failed us 33 years ago, and it's still failing children today. The story of their separation and reunion had captured national attention after a CNN journalist picked up their local newspaper feature. The bracelet that brought them home became a viral sensation, shared millions of times across social media platforms. But what started as a human interest story had evolved into something much more powerful, a movement. We've spent the past 6 months researching informal custody arrangements, under-the-table adoptions, and what we call paper erasures, Amira continued, her counselor's training evident in her measured delivery. What we found was shocking. Conservative estimates suggest that over 10,000 children were placed outside official channels between 1980 and 2000 alone, with black children comprising nearly 60% of those cases. The room was silent except for the scratch of pens on notepads and the soft whir of recording equipment. Isaiah watched faces in the audience, some skeptical, others moved, all paying attention in a way that felt different from his art gallery openings. This wasn't about aesthetic appreciation. This was about justice. The Twin Flame Foundation has already reunited 7 sibling pairs in 6 months, Isaiah said, clicking to a slide showing before and after photos of families. Brothers and sisters who spent decades believing their siblings were deceased, adopted, or simply lost to the system. Each reunion started the same way ours did, with one piece of evidence that the official story was wrong. A hand shot up from the audience. Mr. Lewis, what about the families who adopted these children in good faith? Are you suggesting they should lose the children they've raised? Amira stepped forward to answer. We're not about breaking up families. We're about truth and choice. Every person deserves to know their origin story, the real one, not the sanitized version created by adults who thought they knew better. She paused, her voice softening. I loved my adoptive family, despite their lies about my background. But I spent 33 years feeling incomplete because I was missing pieces of myself I didn't even know existed. After the press conference, Isaiah and Amira walked through downtown Atlanta, past the gallery where his Girl Who Was Erased series still drew crowds. The paintings had taken on new meaning since their story broke. Viewers now understood they were looking not just at art, but at documentation of systemic failure. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't gone to that auction? Amira asked as they paused in front of the gallery window. Isaiah considered the question. I think about it sometimes. But then I remember what you said in therapy last week, about how trauma creates patterns that repeat until they're addressed. I was always going to end up painting missing people. You were always going to end up helping trauma survivors reconnect with themselves. Maybe the bracelet was just the universe finally aligning our paths. Their phones buzzed simultaneously with notifications from the Twin Flame Foundation's hotline. 3 new cases in the past hour, siblings searching for each other, adoptees questioning their official stories, families finally ready to confront their secrets. Ready to go change some more lives? Amira asked, grinning. Always, Isaiah replied. That evening, they sat in Isaiah's studio, working side by side. Amira was reviewing case files while Isaiah painted, not missing persons this time, but found ones. Portraits of the siblings they'd helped reunite, commissioned by families who wanted to celebrate their wholeness rather than mourn their separation. The latest painting showed 2 teenage boys embracing for the first time in 15 years, their faces wet with tears of joy. Below the image, Isaiah had written the words that had become the Foundation's motto. Every person deserves to be remembered. Every family deserves to be whole. You know what I keep thinking about? Amira said, looking up from her files. Martha. Isaiah's brush paused mid-stroke. They hadn't spoken to their great-aunt since that day in Alabama, though Isaiah had heard through Mrs. Henderson that Martha was in declining health. She calls sometimes, Amira continued. Leaves voicemails. Always the same thing, that she's sorry, that she knows we'll probably never forgive her, but that she's proud of what we're doing. Are you thinking about calling her back? Amira was quiet for a long moment. I think about it. Not for her, but for us. For closure. She smiled sadly. In my professional opinion, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to get sick. And in your personal opinion? In my personal opinion, some wounds need time to heal before you can forgive the person who caused them. But maybe we're getting there. Isaiah set down his brush and turned to face his sister, his twin, his other half, his partner in healing a broken system one family at a time. We've got time, he said simply. We've got all the time in the world. Outside the studio windows, Atlanta sparkled in the evening light, full of families eating dinner together, children falling asleep in beds where they belonged, and somewhere, siblings who didn't yet know they were looking for each other. But Isaiah and Amira knew. And tomorrow, they'd help them find their way home. The bracelet sat in its place of honor on Isaiah's easel, no longer a symbol of loss but a reminder that love, like art, could transcend time, distance, and even the most determined efforts to destroy it. Some stories, after all, refuse to stay buried.